Hello, everyone, to the eighth session of traveling around Europe, looking at the different literature in each country. Today, we are going to Italy. We're almost at the end of our tour, actually. It's our eighth destinations, and yeah, I think we have 9 or 10 destinations in total. So this is going to be our last one before we go back, and we cannot skip Italy. Looking at what kind of country Italy is, what kind of books they have, and the famous writers, the same kind of structure as before. So, Italy is a country in southern Europe, and it is well renowned for its historical contributions to art, science, and philosophy, and its literature fundamentally is rooted in its cultural heritage, like all other countries, and it often is also influenced by religious traditions from the Roman Empire and the kind of Catholicism that existed there, and it also often blends the idea of faith and politics and human emotions together into one comprehensive art. It also reflects the Renaissance and um, ancient ancient Rome, all of the mythological ideas from there. And yeah, Italian literature is so deep in its depth. It is a lot like Greek in a way because of ancient Greece. They also had very old and very deep histories in literature. Italy kind of reminds me of Greece in those ideas. Yeah, from the kind of allegorical epic of Dante Alighieri to the modernist ideas of Calvino, Italian literature is really a balance of very traditional, very old ideas with innovation, and it continues to offer timeless insights into human life and complexity, which is fundamentally our theme in literature. Yeah, so our destination today is Italy. Let's go look at the 4 books that we have. We're going to be exploring today Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, Manzoni's The Betrothed, um, Tomasi di Lampedusa's The Leopard, and Calvino's Invisible Cities. I have not read a lot of these works, and so just a heads up, because I have not read them myself, I do want to provide the most accurate information, and I have done extensive research, but if I do have any inaccurate information, please do correct me on the comment section down below. Yeah, and each of these works provide a window to Italy's historical and kind of cultural shifts, and it highlights the unique societal perspective that each writer was placed in. We go back all the way to the 1300s. In 1320, we have Dante, and then we have the 1800s, the 1900s, and then 1972, almost in the 21st century. Yeah, let's go to Dante Alighieri, first of all. Dante Alighieri was an Italian poet and a philosopher. He lived in the early 14th century, and his works are one of the defining works of Western literature. It may not be to the degree of Homer, for example, because he wrote all the way in before Christ, but it still is considered one of the earliest works of literature, and it is well renowned for that. All writers that we've previously mentioned, who, for example, figures like Oscar Wilde, for example, Dostoevsky, they probably all read Dante too. Dante is just that good and that important. We also have Manzoni. He was an Italian poet. We have Lampedusa and Calvino. They were all writers and poets, very renowned and very good at what they are doing, as we will see. Okay, let's first look at The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. So, The Divine Comedy is an epic poem, a very long poem, written in the early 14th century, and it is a spiritual journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven. It's each called Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, and it's guided by the Roman poet Virgil, and later Beatrice, and Dante encounters historical and mythical figures reflecting on sin, redemption, and divine justice. And I probably should have included Virgil, but I thought maybe Virgil deserves a whole different video, because Virgil is on the level of Homer. He is very just on a wholly different level. And yeah, but Dante's Divine Comedy is one of the greatest literary works in Western literature, and it's written in a Tuscan dialect, and it's helped to establish the Italian language as a literary medium for most of Western literature. Yeah, the work is born in both a a personal journey towards finding spiritual realization, but also kind of talking about medieval society. And it can also be kind of thought as a critique of medieval politics, and it blends theological themes with societal understanding and human beliefs, and yeah, with humanist philosophy fundamentally. Yeah, so Dante's kind of very intricate poetry continues to inspire discussions on the topic he wrote about morality, about faith, about someone's soul and their relationship to God, whether God really exists. And this is fundamentally based on kind of Judeo-Christian ideals. It's not in the Muslim tradition. And yeah, this the famous opening line to the Divine Comedy is, midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward path had been lost. Ah, how hard it is to tell what it was like, this wood of wilderness, savage and stubborn. The thought of it renews my fear. And this is Inferno, I believe. He starts in this path in the wilderness, and it's kind of a reflection of how hell and how trials are depicted in the Bible. And Dante draws a lot from biblical passages, from previous understandings of how hells and purgatorio and paradises work, really. Okay, let's move on to The Betrothed by and Manzoni. This was written in 1827, and it is considered the first modern Italian novel. It's set in the 17th century Lombardy during the rule of the Spanish, and the story follows Renzo and Lucia, two young lovers. They plan to get married and are repeatedly stopped by external forces, including the corrupt Don Rodrigo and the widespread kind of social turmoil that exists at the time. And their love story, they're filled with hardship and misfortune, and it is set at the backdrop of the Spanish rule at the time and the societal unrest that existed. But it continues to weave a theme of like justice and providence and faith, because it reflects Manzoni's own profoundly religious beliefs and his interest in history. And I think it's interesting to realize that Manzoni believed history is kind of a moral force. That is, it has a a value, a taint of justice and faith in it. And that's really interesting to see in his works, the way that Renzo and Lucia and their kind of history of love work out, and how it's also in the background of history in the sense that we acknowledge it for Italy. Yeah, so the novel critiques kind of the oppression and the hardships of the time. It is a societal critique, but it also emphasizes resilience and kind of divine guidance within it. Yeah, and it is widely praised for its vivid characters and historical details. It has influenced Italian literature and national identity to a significant degree, and it was used famously during Risorgimento, which was a unification movement in Italy. A very important passage is, and so it was that the two young people, whose love had already been tested by so many trials, that the strength of the bond that tied them together. They no longer feared the trials they had faced, because they had learned to see in each event a part of God's will, the guiding force of their lives. The strength of their love, tempered by the world, had become their greatest refuge. Just very beautiful. And up until the 1830s, we can kind of guess that, oh, maybe people were kind of very wildly religious, and they infused a lot of their religious beliefs into their literature. Let's see how this changes. And it's interesting to reflect, because although ancient Rome had its own mythology, Roman Catholicism was profoundly influential, and especially with Alexander and the great Roman Empire, people became widely and deeply kind of Catholic in Italy, and that kind of is shown in many of these written work. Okay, yeah, let's move on to the next book, which is The Leopard by Lampedusa. So this was published after the writer's death in 1958, and It's about Don Fabrizio Corbera, and he's the Prince of Salina, and he witnesses the decline of Sicilian aristocracy. And already, when we talk about declining aristocracy, we already had a lot of books that talked about this, including the Cherry Orchard with the Russians, right? It's and this is a ever recurring theme that we see over and over again, especially during this period. Um, yeah, and so Don must navigate the kind of shifting societal landscape, and through his eyes, we are able to see the tension in the change and the inevitable passing of order. Yeah, and just Lampedusa's elegant prose is very, very famous, and this makes The Leopard a masterpiece of fiction. It continues to shed light on adaptation and identity and class, which is, again, this theme is a recurring theme that we see over and over again because people in the 1700s and even in the 1800s had a profound belief that their kind of status in society were already fixed from their birth, that who your father was, what kind of family your parents came from, that really defined what kind of person you can end up becoming. Because of that, people were living in a world where aristocracy continued to become wealthier and wealthier, while the poor continued to become poorer and poorer. And this is a rejection of that. They're saying, oh, well, changes must come. And it's also implying that because changes must come, that is, because changes are always happening, it is possible that even if you're not born in a wealthy family, even if your parents were not rich merchants, it is possible for you to become famous and rich and successful. Yeah, and a famous line that encapsulates this is, for things to remain the same, everything must change. The nobles no longer held power, but they held on to their dignity, refusing to bend to the pressures of the new forces. As the years passed, the once untouched world of the Sicilian aristocracy dissolved into a new order, leaving behind only a memory of grandeur and a longing for what could never be reclaimed. Just very beautiful, very thought provoking thing. And I think maybe this kind of aristocracy continues to exist in modern society too. It's not necessarily that, some people are born as kings or queens, unless you live in the UK, that doesn't happen. But it's a societal structure that kind of exists with the wealth income and the kind of opportunities that are available for you. And although it has become more equal than previous ages, this continues to be a problem in our society. The last book on a on a very very influential book is The Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. The Invisible City is about the explorer Marco Polo. He is very, very famous, and it describes a series of imaginary cities to the Mongol emperor, and each kind of represents a different aspect of human experience and imagination. And the novel explores the intersection of reality and an illusion because this is an imaginary city. And yeah, it's each city offers you a insight into human nature, and it's a each city, it serves as an allegory to a human experience, to a memory, to the blurring lines between reality and fiction. And this is a very, very fun book to read. I've heard it's very interesting because not only is it just a very profound exploration of what kind of history and identity can a place have, but it's also a very human narrative, and it's very easy to follow compared to other heavier books that we've looked at. Yeah, and the famous a famous quote is, oh, that is from the last one. I apologize for that. But this famous quote is, the city, however, does not tell its past, but contains in its lines of a hand written in the palm, and it can read it. Cities are made of memories and stories, some lost, some revisited. Each street, each building carries echoes of who we are, but only the city itself knows the weight of all its histories. See the city clearly, one must look beyond the present moment to the past that still lingers in the air. Yeah, so here are some other further suggestions. We have um, Pilandero, Sevo, and Nessie, and they are pretty recent writers. They're all famous for each, respectively, six characters in search of an author, conscience, and My People, and Nessie won the Schregler Prize in 2011. He is a pretty modern writer, and I would definitely recommend reading into modern writing because very realistically, it's going to be hard for you to have fun reading books like Dante and even Monsoni, who published in the 1800s. And although their books were pioneers in shaping Italy's kind of national and cultural literature, it's just difficult to have fun reading it. And I think a good practice is working backwards, reading the most modern poems, writers from Nessie, and then going back 1900, 1800s, and then eventually you can move your way up to Dante and Virgil, and maybe you'll have fun there seeing how modern writers have been influenced by those previous writers. Yeah, and all these writings, all these authors, they continue to reflect Italy's kind of enduring influence because all these books are so well known, especially um, Dante. I cannot even like emphasize how much Dante has impacted modern literature. And yeah, so it's Italian literature is so deeply intertwined not only with the country's history from the Renaissance and to the humanist ideals and modernist kind of experiments in the 20th century that most of these authors were involved in, but also the universal themes that we continue to talk about human identity, about morality, about people and love and life and what it means to live your fullest life. Yeah, so Italian literature is a very multifaceted and complicated experience, but it's fundamentally so worth all the time you spent on it. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me on this journey to the literary life of Italy. I hope you've gained a bit more on your understanding of literature and you maybe have a deeper appreciation of all these masterpieces and the kind of timeless relevance that it represents. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your help. Thank you.